Welcome to another episode of Grit, the Power of Resilience, where we talk to leaders about their stories of resilience to get where they are today. I'm Shira, Lazar, and joining me is my lovely co-host, Amina Zamani. Welcome back.
Hey everyone, welcome.
Yes, and we have such a special guest that really exemplifies grit today, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Swan Sit is our personal friend, but she is just such a legend outside of being a powerhouse.
Yes. Yeah, she just a little background. She's a global digital marketing executive, Clubhouse's biggest star. You might have seen her there, a board member of 3 public companies. And so we're going to be talking to her about immigrating to the US as a child, her incredible career, being managed by Gary Vaynerchuk, and of course, her personal life. So let's welcome her into the show. Swan Sit, welcome.
Welcome.
Hi, ladies. How are you? It's so good to be here with you today.
Hey, Swan. Thank you for being here with us. What Shira said, you need no introduction, but I think the reason we all fell in love with you is your heart. You have such a passion to support women and uplift people around you. And I think you can't teach that, And I think that the definition of grit and resilience is to move past adversity quickly. And you've had quite an interesting life. Can you share some context about how you developed your grit and resilience?
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you for having me. I have so much admiration and respect for the two of you, so I'm so flattered to be invited on to here.
Yay.
So grit and resilience, it's sometimes something you're born with or something you develop in situations and circumstances. We came to the US when I was 6 years old from Hong Kong, and my parents didn't even finish middle school. They weren't allowed the chance to go to high school because they started working so early. So for me, coming to the US, having to stretch, learning a new language, fitting in culture, my parents working 2 jobs, nights and weekends, it was a whole ecosystem that just develops grit. Now, it didn't help that I had a bowl haircut, standard issue for immigrant kids, big purple glasses, and I ran around talking about outer space and aerospace, right? I did not have a lot of friends, but what doesn't break you makes you stronger. And the more challenges you have, the more grit you develop. And I think it's an asset if you know what to do with it. Some people come out swinging, ready to take on the world. Others, we take a hit, we might take a few hits, and then over time you have to make a choice. Do you decide to overcome, or do you let it take over you? And for most of us, it's a choice that we take sometimes when we're 6, sometimes when we're 16, sometimes when we're 60. But it's a choice. And this is where I think, number one, having a strong sense of self is really important. And number two, having a tribe around you to support when you're having those days where that inner strength isn't necessarily kicking in, your tribe is your biggest cheerleader. So for me, things like my cousin calling me pigeon to this day started off as something that was tough when I was a kid, but now is a great story I tell to relate to others with empathy. But at some point, you have to make a choice. Everyone's served the lumps as we go. What do you do with it? And I think for me, ultimately, my Asian tiger parents, it was a difficult upbringing because an A- is an Asian F. Harvard was the only option. Thank God that worked out. But in some ways, while those expectations were so high to reach, it also gave me that drive. And that drive permeated professionally and personally. And that's what actually helped me develop that grit, whether it was a tough project at school or work, or it was a tough social and friendship one. That grit and resilience, I just practiced. It's a muscle. You develop over time, you learn to ask for help, and then someday you're so good at it, you get to do that for other people.
And you've definitely done that. Even for me, we've had so many incredible conversations even recently where you are pushing me. And I'm so grateful for that because it's rare to have someone in your life that does that, let alone women. Right. And even Amina, pushing me to be here today on a weekends when we're recording, you know what I mean? Like stuff like that, I acknowledge and I'm grateful for that because that's what it's about. But I guess from Harvard, you then became an executive to all these big brands and corporations. You've, since left that, you went to Clubhouse. Talk about that journey and what that was like for you and how that's informed where you are right now.
Now, all these transitions are kind of crazy because I spent most of my career in the corporate world. I was the head of digital marketing at Nike, Revlon, Elizabeth Arden, Estee Lauder. And, a few years ago, I decided I might be done with corporate. I've done it my whole life. And while I arguably on paper had a pretty successful career, something was missing. I was always doing something for someone else. And so while I loved those opportunities, I got to use women that weren't typical beauty influencers in amazing beauty campaigns, like Chelsea Handler and Iris Apfel, who's almost 100 years old. Actually, she's 100. She turned 100 this year. But I got to use women that weren't typical beauty faces to Trojan horse social change in digital transformation for these companies. But there was something bigger. And I didn't know what that was at the time. But I would still say now, even though I've left the corporate full-time world, I still sit on boards. I advise a VC and a SPAC. So I still have a foot in that world because that's the majority of our economy. Now, that said, there's a part of me that's in the creator world. And part of the initial transition was understanding the creator economy was shifting. We started off by paying influencers to advertise our products. Then we might have done a collaboration with them. Say we did a makeup palette, and the way I would set up deals is a much smaller upfront retainer, but a revenue share. So you post as many times as you need to, and then you get a share of the revenue of the product. So much more aligned incentives. But then I was like, well, what about the creator economy that comes from the creator themselves? So I'm CMO of an energy drink I started with Bryce Hall and Josh Richards, two TikTokers with 60 million followers. And now we're trying to see if the creators in the driver's seat, what happens. Well, little did I know that that would transition to me becoming a creator after a long career in corporate. So if you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we were all locked inside, and this little social audio app called Clubhouse showed up. For me, it was a chance to reconnect with old friends and make new friends from all over the world. But what I didn't realize is as I was helping the community, because I love mentoring and I've done a lot of things in the corporate world. So I always say, if I can't be a good example, let me be a horrible warning. So I'm very free with advice. Advice is free. You have to go do the work. But as I was spending time on there and making friends, helping people in professional and personal situations, my following grew. And it just compounded and compounded. So I call myself an accidental creator because my socials were private until this. But if you really authentically are who you are and you're helping people, you're creating value and helping build community, followers naturally come. I think we get so obsessed with running a contest or tagging others. If you're actually resonating with people, followers naturally come. It doesn't mean there aren't shortcuts and hacks to help accelerate it, but just because you have a number doesn't mean you have true fans. So that journey on Clubhouse was wild because I went from being relatively unknown outside of the corporate world to 3.5 million followers. And now I get to talk for a living, right? I have the most amazing partners at Vayner, which helped me figure out my messaging and my platforms. And now I'm leaning into third part of what I do, which is sort of this Web3 NFT space.
Yeah.
The luxury of being a creator it's not accommodating a corporate narrative. I get to talk about anything I want. In my AMAs, I've talked about sexism in the workplace. I've talked about freezing my eggs as a female executive. And I talk about things I'm curious about, which right now happen to be blockchain, Web3s, crypto, and how that has the potential to change how we live and play. So if I had to divide my life up, there's still the corporate side where I'm advising boards and VCs and SPACs. There's the creator life as working with creators, being a creator myself, but then advising in this Web3 space, which is almost like a Web 2.5 as we make the transition, because my previous career was transformation. It's helping brands and marginalized communities, especially women, people of color, understand the new technology. Every time we have an inflection point, it's an opportunity to democratize opportunity and wealth and access. So for me, that's my passion. That's the North Star. And that's the thing I think, as much as I loved my jobs, I was missing. It's being able to truly help people the minute I wake up every day.
Wow.
Yes.
That is so inspiring. And really, that is the core definition of resilience, right? Is just to be able to be of service and get outside of yourself. Because when we're stuck, we have no resilience. We have no motivation, and you have so much of it. And now specifically with your desire for educating people on NFTs and getting into Web3, can you share a bit more about that for people that aren't familiar? Like, what is it and why is it relevant and why should we care?
Now, the funny thing is I don't wake up and turn on a camera. I'm not a natural creator. So for me, wanting to create content, if it's coming from me, it would be terrible. The reason I'm doing it is for other people, which makes it easier. So if that day I don't feel like doing content, I remind myself it's not for me, it's for all the people that are waiting to get access and to learn. So I think it's an incredible time to be doing this. The issue is that like this industry moves so fast. An hour is a day is a week is a month. So it can be incredibly overwhelming for people coming in. Also, like most technical initiatives, it's laden with jargon and acronyms that are really intimidating to people.
Yeah.
So where I start is just educating people in very basic layman's terms. What's blockchain? What's crypto? What's an NFT? And I think people understand it to be a doodle, like a cartoon or a piece of art, whereas an NFT is actually a digital record on the blockchain. That's all it is. It's a non-fungible token. Fungible means it's changeable. In this case, it's non-fungible. So once you put it there, it's authentic, it's immutable, you can't change it. Right now, it happens to be in the form of art and these PFP profile photos, but it could be land deeds, birth certificates, medical records, your purchase history, your own data. So the possibilities for it are so big. And what I want people to understand is you may not be into flipping NFTs for profit. You may not understand how people are creating these movements around these meme coins, but that's not the only opportunity here. It's kind of like in the early days, like you went to a web cafe to do what? Well, nothing like what we're doing today. That's the fine tip of the iceberg we're starting with. But the ability for this, for Web3 to change how we live and play and put ownership and control back in consumers' hands of their own data, their own path to purchase, their own communities and loyalty, that's what the power of this can be.
Yeah, I mean, I know that as we're both playing in this world right now. Still, though, people question it. And when people question things outside of you, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the skeptics? You know, when you're diving into a space that you really care about, because sometimes for me, it can, and I'm better now, but it makes me question myself, right? There, you know, because maybe I haven't been grounded in myself and really clear about my worth. Someone will say something and then I'll be like, well, maybe they're right. Maybe this is not the right place to be in. Have you ever been in that position where you've questioned yourself, and how have you come back to being like, no, trusting your instincts, and this is where I want to be?
Every day. Because guess what? I was new not that long ago. We're all new, and it's so early. I know we keep saying that, but we're literally building the plane as we're flying in it. So anyone who tells you they're an expert, probably lying, because we're creating it as we go. But it doesn't mean I don't question myself. And I try to have a lot of empathy around when I started, the dumb questions I asked, which aren't dumb at all for anyone. But the way I kind of go about it is, I think the biggest part of it is breaking down complex concepts, especially when they have all this lore around them of being negative, to things that people can understand that's relatable to themselves, and packaging it in a way that the person would receive it the best. So let me give you two useful tips on how I do this. The first is, let's go to the second thing I mentioned, is how do people intake information? So I've used this in management. I've even used this in friendships and relationships, but I use Myers-Briggs as a framework. Now, I know for some people that's outdated. Doesn't matter. Pick a framework. They're all good because it actually just helps you like shape your thinking and your communication. So for someone who's answer first or answer last, right? How I tell them the story really matters. It's not about the message. The message is 50% of it, but how I shape the narrative, whether it's answer first or answer last, really depends on who's receiving it. The way I go about, are you a thinker or are you a feeler? Am I appealing to your science and statistics, or am I appealing to the emotional quotient of this conversation and how it can impact humanity? So understanding, even within 2 minutes of talking to somebody, where they come from and shaping your message differently, top down, bottom up, science or feelings, already helps intake that. The other half of it that I do, though, is it has to be personal to them. So I can go through this whole journey of explaining what all of this is 101. And the question I get asked most often is, but I can't touch it, right? We talk about art and digital assets and stuff. They're like, I can't touch it, is always the thing I get asked. So what do? I ask them to take out their phone and I ask them to show me their favorite photos in their camera reel. And they're like, here's my pet, here's my kids, here's my last vacation. I was like, cool. How would you feel if I deleted all of them off your phone right now? And of course, sheer panic happens, right? And they're like, don't you dare, don't touch my phone. I was like, well, you can't touch those either, but they have value to you, right? So I think understanding where the person's coming from, but also relating it to who they are, is how I get the message across. And it doesn't mean that I don't question myself, but by the time I get to the conversation and that light bulb clicks, I'm back in my own zone and I get, wait, this is the right thing we're doing. And sometimes going on the journey of exercising that muscle of bringing people in actually gives you the confidence to keep doing it, because you're always going to have naysayers. No matter if it's Web3, no matter if it's like convincing your friend to switch to a new brand of coffee, you're always going to have people who resist you. But it's about connecting with people. And that comes all the way back to how you first asked about grit and resilience. That doesn't work. Try something else. Try something else. Because grit and resilience don't happen in a vacuum. They don't work without EQ because you're not a solo person living in a bubble. It has to then intersect with everyone else. Yeah. So the flip side of grit and resilience is empathy and EQ. And if you put those together, that's how you create change in this world.
Yeah. First of all, you're brilliant. I mean,
yeah.
like, and
the process of how you do that so quickly, like sometimes when I'm just in a moment and I'm talking to someone, like I know there's probably a better way to present this, but in that moment, my brain will just go as fast as I want it to go to get there, and always be after the fact. In hindsight, I'm like, I could have done that better. I could have said that better.
Every time.
Swan, you're great at the left and right side of the brain. And I think you take difficult concepts like blockchain is intimidating. And really, we know this, but it's quite male dominated, right? Like even NFTs. And so you have this real message for women to educate themselves. Can you talk a bit about really just about that? And why is it important for specifically women to get involved?
Women and marginalized people have been losing out for way too long. These technologies have changed our lives, but it was the people who were early and people who had access that won. And honestly, I used to be really scared of the VC world. And I was like, oh my God, they're such good investors. Now I'm realizing, well, yes, they might be good investors, but a lot of them just were in the circles that passed around the good deals. So this is what we're trying to change. Right? Yes, they're good investors. They're not terrible, but how many deals would we have invested in if we'd even known about them, if we'd been invited to the table? Right. So exactly. So that's why now with social, with Web 2 and the reach we all have, we have a tool to start democratizing it and bringing more people in. So yeah, I'll Trojan horse that too. I might be in a clubhouse room talking about something completely different. I'm like, by the way, have you guys learned about Web3 and NFTs? Well, we were just talking about fashion, but guess what? This is how this is going to change the fashion world. So that's why it's important to do. Let me give you an example of how this industry is still really difficult. I spoke at a really prominent NFT conference. I was super proud, one of the few people selected. And just by chance, our panel, an hour before we went live, ended up being all women because the men either canceled, no-showed, canceled flights, whatever. So how cool is it that an NFT panel was all women? So we get up on stage, we're super excited. All the girls are high-fiving, etc. We get to introduce ourselves. The male moderator then speaks for 10 minutes on his own opinion on the topic, then brings up 3 white men from the audience and gives them the microphone, not to ask questions, but to opine themselves on the topic. When you had 3 women at the forefront of this industry speaking about their experience and expertise on this topic, we looked at each other and we're like, what do we do? And that was a few months ago, not years or decades ago.
Yeah.
So it's
what did you do?
I inserted myself 2 more times. I'm probably a little bolder than the other 2 ladies, but I also, when I was saying, well, she actually has an even better perspective than me because she works on this project, and I'll throw the mic to them. You have to do this. The interesting thing is, I think Web 2, there's so many seats at the table for these marginalized communities, right? There's only 1 or 2 women there. So in a way, it forced us to compete in a mindset of scarcity, because that was the entire playing field. We couldn't make the table bigger. Guess what? We don't even need a table. We're sitting there in a cuddle puddle on the floor at this point. So if we change how we bring people in this Web3 space, we create more seats. I think the mindset of abundance has been so important to me in this transition in this stage of my career. And the reality is, like, if you look at the women in blockchain, there's probably less than 20% of women in crypto blockchain, period. Not leading projects, just buying and aware. And if you look at the NFT projects, less than 5% are run by women. That is not representative of the women who have the skills and the drive. Okay, maybe you can say if it was 60-40, it's 30-70, maybe there's not that many women with the skill set. Are you telling me that less than 5% of women know how to do this? Absolutely not. So it's so important to use this as the momentum and inflection point to push it forward. It's a battle we do every day, but when there's a technology that actually accelerates this development, we have a conscious choice now to actually change it. So that's why, for example, BFF exists, right? That was started by Jamie Schmidt and Britt Morin. And they're leading in a group of incredible women founders. And this org, by the way, is not just the founding team, it's everyone as we grow. But there are people like Gwyneth Paltrow, Mila Kunis, Tyra Banks, Kat Cole, all leading this incredible charge to bring women and gender non-binary people into the fold. And by the way, men are a part of it too. We need our allies. They're buying our NFTs, they're helping promote it. But without conscious effort, you'd need the battle every day, but you need organizations, you need leadership and programming to make it happen. So the idea is not to marginalize other communities in a reverse kind of discrimination, but it's to make us all work together. And I will say the men that have raised their hands to be allies have been incredible, saying, how can I help?
Yeah. And how can I bring you into deals, and how can I mentor you? It's like, it's not just about saying, oh, giving you a little pat on the back, right? Or retweet. That's great though, by the way. It's about them saying, like, what do you actually want to accomplish? And like, do I have deals that I can include you into? Am I sending you links and giving you quote unquote alpha, right? Like, I think that's the next stage. And I encourage, any gender to do that, including women to women, right? And we've talked about it. It's like, if you know about something, I think in the past, just like you said, scarcity was like, well, there might be only one woman invited to this. So like, I can't share this with someone. That's not the case anymore. Like, yeah, we have to get out of that mindset. So with that, do you have days, like, I want to know, because you are such a powerful, strong woman. Do you have days you feel off? How do you get through that? Like, do you have days where you're just like, oh, you have a bunch of big things happening and you just feel like you don't have that mindset? How do you push through? Do you have any routines or anything?
I do. It's interesting that you talked about the impression of who I am. One of my friends, an early friend named Min on Clubhouse, when we first met, told me I was at the same time the kindest and most intimidating person he's ever met. And I guess that's a compliment, because that is a duality that I play with. I mean, I am coming in with force, but kindness is my North Star. So I think those dualities do exist, but with a huge undercurrent of imposter syndrome, like I think we all have. So we all have those days where it feels a little tough. So here's what I do about it. I realized, back to what I said before, you need the grit and resilience, but you need your tribe and your supporting community. And I'm terrible at asking for help, just like most overachievers, because it feels like failure. And I realized, well, if I don't ask for help, then I'm literally not living up to the thing that I'm telling other people to go get for themselves. I'm a hypocrite. So I said, well, how do I make it easier for me to ask for help? I have certain friends that have known me forever and know that when I call, it's a I need you time. But I don't do it very often. So what I did was I created a code word with each of them. And it's like the funniest, silliest, most joyous experience we'd had. So Amina, for us, it might be Burning Man, because you mentioned that's where we met. That's our bonding experience that has kept our friendship going for years. So I might set up a deal with you and say, Amina, if you ever get a text from me that just says Burning Man, that's me trying to ask for help without being able to use those words, because I feel like I'm either weak or I'm bothering you. And if you could, within the next few hours, shoot me a call for 5 minutes, that would mean the world to me. It's a little hack. It sounds so silly that I can have my resume and I can have my platform of a few million followers, and I still need to say a code word to ask for help. But you got to figure those things out. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and beat myself up that I naturally don't do it, to ask for help very easily, but you have your workarounds, right? Though one of the most interesting things is when I left corporate, I figured out who my friends were, right? When you don't have access, you don't have brand budgets, you figure out who's really your tribe. And once I went through that journey and kind of came out the other side, realizing that, these are my ride or dies, it's no big deal to ask them for help. It's no big deal to have a silly little code word, but that was my hack, because to this day, I still don't think I'm good at saying, hey, I really need you today.
Oh, I love that. And we do have a Burning Man love story. We got our ticket from the same couple, right? Yes. So one person gave you the ticket, the other person gave me the ticket.
Exactly. But that's making more room at the table. You could have taken 2 tickets and say, I'm going to bring my friend. But we went on the faith that our friends wanted us to have a beautiful experience and to meet someone new. I mean, we went to a desert for a week with a stranger. And we trusted our friends to do that, but they opened the doors, created more room at the table. And now you and I are bringing more people into that community. And Shira, if you haven't been, you're definitely coming with us.
You're coming this year. So on that note of bringing more people to the table, I think you talked about wealth and abundance, and the disparity with wealth and women and men still exists. Now you also talked about allies, and we need those male allies, but let's just focus on the women and disparity. What are the 3 things that women can do specifically to get in the wealth game? I mean, obviously Web3 is the future and that is going to help them, but what do you think about that, Swan?
3 things women can do. Educate yourselves. The biggest change, even if it's not women educating themselves on technology or wealth, but sometimes I talk to millennials and Zs that have started successful businesses, and they kind of poo-poo the older generation, the boomers, the Xers, like, we're so much better. I'm like, that actually go back to 40 years ago. If you wanted to start a business, there's no such thing as VC. There's no such thing as Shopify where you can build your own website. There wasn't even Facebook or Instagram to post. So what did you do when you had to start a business? You either got a paper route or built a lemonade stand, or you went to the bank for a loan, which you couldn't do when you were under 18. So that wasn't even possible. But what is now possible is a wealth of information at our fingertips, as long as you can get to internet access. Whether you have it on your phone, whether you can go to the local library, there is a way. And all that information is just sitting there. It's how bad do you want it? I get that decades ago, access wasn't there, because by the time something made it onto a dusty library book, it might have been out of date. And yes, things move faster, but with access to the internet, with people pointing you to the right places, the right documents, the right websites, the right communities, you can build that for yourself. So the first thing is you've got to have that drive and want to educate yourself. Secondly, join communities, because this is where we openly share. So there's education and intaking information, but then there's giving back. And a community has to be 2 things. It's the intersection of purpose with frequency of touch. So a community all has to believe in the same thing, but you have to participate in it often enough to feel like a community. So when I say you've educated yourself enough to participate, or you're educating yourself from the community, participate in it. Raise your hand, speak up, say, I don't know this. How do I figure this out? By that, you actually probably are taking the hit for 20 people who also had the same question and were too nervous.
Right. Yeah.
Or once you get the answer to the question, take the time to explain it to others. Right. So that's the second piece. Then the third piece is dream big, because now you've got the tools. You're educating yourself. You've got your tribe and your support community. You're learning from each other. You're helping others. Dream big with some people. If you're ready to take that plunge, right, put aside all the, but what about this? Or you can't do that, and find your tribe to build big with. So if you do then want to take a step into it, whether it's dipping a toe in and buying a little bit of crypto or your first NFT that's inexpensive, or you're like, I'm ready to dive in and build in this new world. 3 things. They're somewhat sequential, but they all run in parallel. And honestly, none of it can you do alone. So I'd say actually, like, the second one's probably the most important out of those.
Oh my God, those are so great. A lot of people talk about burnout these days, including with this world and space going quicker and quicker, as you mentioned. Do you ever feel that way, and how do you deal with it?
I feel that way every day. I work 18/7. And that's insane, because that would be a problem if it were someone else and I was advising them. But here's the thing. I work more hours than I ever did in corporate, and I arguably did pretty well there. But this is mine, and I've never had that sense of ownership. And it serves a noble higher purpose, that if I got hit by a truck tomorrow, I would be absolutely happy with the way I've lived this life, because we're changing lives, we're helping people, and there's still a long ways to come, but we're planting the seeds for what this next inflection point could look like. So yes, burnout possibly, but the difference is it's mine, so it feels amazing and it's fun. I was going to take Friday afternoon off last week, and I was like, what am I going to do? I'm not going to the beach. I'm not going out to eat. I'm buying NFTs, because it's actually fun to me.
You can buy NFTs at the beach. Come on. You can be like on your phone at the beach.
Yeah, I suppose, but maybe I'll do that. I'm going to try that today and let you know how that goes. But,
Yes.
When you're lucky where your purpose meets your work, I mean, what a gift. I get paid to speak for a living, which I obviously like to talk. I get paid to help people understand this new space and co-create the future. So for me, work is play. When I go to social events, it's work. So for me, I am trying to watch that burnout thing because I'm putting so many hours into it. But when you're having so much fun, I guess I'm playing a little too hard as well. So I'm probably the worst person to ask about it. But also when you're working with your friends, like this isn't work. This is me hanging out with two women that I love and respect. Like that's not work. So I think you just have to redefine what that even is anymore. But you have to figure out what your self-care is. My self-care is connecting with people, and I'm doing it right now. So I guess I've just found a way to merge them together.
Yeah, that's lovely. I think just as we close, you talked a lot about community and support systems. I'd love to learn about the communities that you think women should join, specifically as they're trying to get into NFTs, crypto, or just even in the stock market. Like what communities do you suggest? There's so much out there.
BFF I mentioned.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I mean,
My BFF, go check it out.
Yeah, mybff.xyz. That's a great one because not only is it a great community, it's programming and there's a DAO. So it's structure, which is really cool. I think spending time on Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces, both audio, social, there's just a lot of concentration of Web3 NFT talk. Now, like anything in social, you've got to go with a critical eye because one person's opinion is not necessarily truth. And because, like I said, we're all building this as we go, you could have 10. I ask people all the time, how would you define an NFT? I get 10 different answers from 10 different people, and they're all correct. So it's not always that there's scammers and fraud, which there is some stuff to watch out for. It's that it's new and there's so many broad applications. So actually spending time in those spaces and listening, there's a lot of people who give lots of time, tons of their expertise, because we want more people to succeed. By the way, it's an altruistic thing, but also this whole thing crumbles and implodes if we don't democratize it. If we have to convert crypto back to fiat to pay our rent, it doesn't work. So if not out of altruism, I tell people do it out of self-preservation because this won't work unless we have everyone on board. But Twitter Spaces and Clubhouse are great centers for that. And then there's different organizations like NFT Now, NFT Evening. Then there's conferences like South by Southwest now has some programming around it. NFT LA I'm speaking at. I think I actually have 10 different VCon. I'm speaking at 10 different events just about NFTs over the next 3 months. So events are now great places to not only hear from speakers on stage to learn from them, but everyone you meet has that same common purpose. So now you can learn from each other. So multitude of resources, Shira's always doing rooms on this as well. I think she does one every week on Twitter. So go into those spaces and learn because unfortunately there's no textbook on this and it's moving so fast. If anyone tried to write a textbook, it'd be outdated in a month. So it's all through absorption. And what I do is I multitask, right? I could be cleaning the kitchen on a Saturday morning. And guess what? I have Spaces or Clubhouse on. Instead of having the TV or the radio and Spotify on, I now listen to Clubhouse and Spaces because I can absorb while doing 10 other things. Wouldn't recommend it when you're on a Zoom, but when you're doing anything else in the car, etc., it's like listening to a book on tape. It's just live audio.
Yeah, and you're learning. Well, so many great tips. Thank you so much for sharing, all of you here today, and just for being you. We so appreciate it. I appreciate you.
I do too.
It
was just so cool because I didn't know that you two knew each other. So I was talking to Shira just like last week. I was like, yeah, Swan. She's like, wait a minute.
We've quickly become friends and and that's what it's all about. It is about the tribe. It is about outreach and just we even say it's not about necessarily scheduling a call. If you just need support, if you need a quick advice, just a voice chat, right? You don't need to make it so formal. But again, Swan Sit, thank you so much for joining us. And you can follow her everywhere at Swan Sit. We appreciate you for showing your grit and embodying grit. And we'll see you all soon. And thank you so much, Amina, too.
Thank you, Shira. Bye, Swan.
And Chris, who's directing.
Bye.